Oh, I have that? Awesome. And we will go ahead and get started.
Hello, and welcome to our May 2024 Professional Development Webinar for ACTE's Work-Based Learning Division. My name is Safa Spinoza. I am a Career Education Coordinator from the Atlanta metro area, and I am honored to serve you as your ACTE Work-Based Learning Professional Development Committee Chair. Throughout the year, I work with a committee of amazing educators to plan monthly webinars for our division. If you're interested in finding out more about joining the Professional Development Committee, please reach out to me by email. We have a quick announcement that our ACTE's Career Tech Vision is now open and the registration is available on the website. We'll be in San Antonio, Texas this year from December 4th through the 7th, and I hope you can make it and join us for some great WBL division sessions. Our topic this month is slightly different. Usually we focus on tips, best practices, or other resources for work-based learning programs. This year, we wanted to end the school year by reflecting on some of the wins and successes with the hope that it would not only help you to end the year on a high note, but also that it could serve as a catalyst for you to share your work-based learning wins with your schools, administrators, and community. During today's presentation, if you're inspired to do so, please feel free to briefly share a success or win that you have witnessed in this year in the chat. We plan to gather these and share them with the webinar participants. And if time allows, we may ask you to do a brief 1-minute share of your story. This month we have a special treat. Mr. Kevin Paul Scott will be joining us after having recently returned from delivering the keynote address at the National ACTE Work-Based Learning Conference. Kevin has traveled to 6 continents and spoken to leaders from more than 100 countries. He co-founded the leadership consultancy ADO, which is Latin for inspire, and developed the National Chick-fil-A Leadership Academy, Coca-Cola Leader Lab, and the Baltimore Ravens Leadership Institute. Within leadership, Kevin has been featured by national news agencies and numerous publications. He's the author of 5 books, including his latest, which is entitled Inspired Every Day, and that goes right along with our theme for today. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Paul Scott.
Awesome. Thank you so much. How's everybody doing today? Thumbs up. Everybody doing well? Man, I'm so impressed that you're on this call as we cruise into the last part of the school year, maybe past the end of the school year for some of you, and some of you got a few weeks left. But it's really good to see you. I got to meet several of you in Milwaukee, which was a real highlight for me. So I'm going to dive right in. Here's my deal. I am going to try to cover this topic with you in about the next 20 minutes. And then as we end our time together, I'd really love to hear from each of you as you share ways that you stay inspired. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We're going to be talking about being inspired every day. So being inspired every day. Now, I'm going to be super transparent with you. I am under the deck of a place at the beach right now. We finished the last day of school Tuesday, and yesterday my wife and I loaded these 3 kids up with us to head down to the beach. Our oldest is George. He starts kindergarten in the fall. Amelia is 3, and that little one, who's actually kind of a big kid, is Andrew. He turns 1 week from today. It was about a 6-hour drive down to the beach, and I'll tell you this, anytime we do a road trip, I'm a little bit nervous because I go back to our very first road trip with our oldest son, George. We live just north of Atlanta, and my wife's family is from about 3 hours south. And so we had taken George to visit her family. We were returning from the trip, headed home. And I don't know about you, but I really take a lot of pride in beating the GPS. Anybody else? That's like a big deal for you. So we're feeling pretty good. We're on our way home, and that's when the smell comes from the back seat, which means we were not going to beat the GPS. We were going to need to make a pit stop. I remember if you've ever been on this road in Georgia, we're on Interstate 75, which I believe runs from like Florida to Michigan. We're south of Atlanta. It's exit 212. We make a right off the interstate. There's a big convenience store up there, and we pull into that convenience store. And I remember I opened the car door at the back, and I was the first one. I say I was the first one at the scene of the crime. I was the first one there to get my son out of the car, and I unbuckled his seatbelt, and I put my hand behind his back. And if you're a parent, you know what I'm about to say. This is not a good feeling at all. This is what we call a blowout. The diaper did not contain everything that it needed to contain. So I am pulling our son out of the car. I'm holding him like as far as you possibly can away from your body. I remember taking him inside there and changing his diaper in the convenience store bathroom. If there would have been a water hose out front, I would have put him on the ground and sprayed him down. It would have been a much easier process, but I ended up changing his diaper. I came back, got in the car. I remember being about 2 miles north and my wife asking, what did you do with the diaper, or what did you do with the clothes? And I'm like, the clothes are in the trash can back at the convenience store. Those things are not fit for service anymore. Okay, some of you are like, why in the world is he telling us a story about changing a diaper? Here's when I think about this concept of being inspired every day, I think that we confuse inspiration a lot because we think about it as those rah moments. Some of you maybe are having those right now. It's the end of a school year, it's graduation, it's when students get that first job. It's those moments that are really exciting. But when I think about the concept of being inspired every day, here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being inspired enough to be willing to do things you wouldn't otherwise do because you are so driven by the purpose and the goals in your life. So for me, I think I was inspired to change a diaper. I didn't want to do it, but I was willing to do it because it served an ultimate purpose for me. So being inspired every day, and actually, let me give you this statistic just for a second before we keep moving. And if you were in Milwaukee, I shared this. If you're an adult and you have a job in the United States of America, do you know 79% of people are disengaged at work? If you have students, 53% of them are disengaged. So when we think about inspiration, I believe that a lack of engagement is a result of a lack of inspiration. So all of us could benefit from this idea. And what I have found, I've done research over the last several years, and I've asked 2 questions. I bet I've asked them more than 1,000 times. And my first question is this: are you inspired at work right now? And I'm asking you, you think about in your day-to-day job, in your work-based learning roles, in your career and technical education, are you inspired right now? And unfortunately, a lot of people are not. And then I'll ask them the second question: can you think of a time you have been inspired? So are you inspired right now? Maybe, maybe not. But can you think of a time you have been inspired? And almost everybody can think of that moment. And what I have found is in the times we're inspired, these 3 ingredients exist every single time. Every single time. There is a clear purpose. There are partners in this with you, and there are problems. Now, some of you, I'm losing you on this problem thing. Just hold with me for a few minutes, because what I want you to do right now in your mind, I want you to think of a moment you've been inspired. I'm not going to ask you to share it right now. I just want to ask you to think about it. Think of the times you've been inspired. And when we get to the end of this, I want you to check me and see, when you were inspired, did all 3 of these things exist? I want to unpack them for you for just a few minutes. Let's talk first about this idea of purpose. When we are inspired, we have a clear purpose. Some of you, maybe you go back and you remember when you got into teaching in the first place. Maybe you remember the interaction with somebody, a first boss or a teacher or a coach or somebody that impacted your life, and it gave you a vision or a goal or a purpose to do something that actually makes a difference. The older we get, sometimes we lose sight of that purpose, because sometimes we start to get focused on the next rung on the ladder. If we could go back and get this next degree, it's going to help us because we'll be able to make a little bit more money. If we can get to this next role, that'll be valuable. And oftentimes we lose sight of that core purpose in our life. Can I tell you today that purpose is paramount? That if you're, I don't know another way to tell you, you will not be consistently inspired if you do not have a crystal clear purpose. And here's what's amazing. When you have a purpose, you will be willing to do things you wouldn't otherwise do. Now, I understand that there are some folks on this call that may not have been in Milwaukee. So if you're in Milwaukee, hold with me for 2 minutes. If you weren't in Milwaukee, I want to make sure you get this piece right here. When I stand before a group and I talk about purpose, I notice that some people nod their heads, they get it, and others are like, their eyes kind of glaze over. They think purpose may feel a little bit fluffy. They don't know why they really need it. And I use this illustration every time. I ask them a series of 3 questions. The first question I ask is, how many of you graduated from high school? How many of you graduated from high school? And typically, if people are actually paying attention, most of their hands will go up. They graduated from high school. And then I'll ask them a second question. How many of you, when you were in high school, you took a class you thought was stupid? Now, I love asking that question with a group of teachers because they feel a little insecure, like maybe I shouldn't answer this. But if people are honest, every single one of us took classes that we thought were pointless, were stupid. And then I ask them this third question. How many of you passed the class you thought was stupid? And most of them raised their hands. So they had a class they thought was stupid, and yet they passed it anyway. And I'll ask them this question: why? Like, if it's dumb, if it was stupid, why would you even put forth the effort? And you get a variety of answers. They kind of bucket down to things like, I needed it to graduate, or I needed a certain GPA. Or those people that are really honest will say something like this: if I wouldn't have passed it, my parents would have freaked out. Something like that. I want you to see this principle here. In each of those situations, there was a goal or a vision or a purpose. The goal was to graduate. The vision was a certain GPA. The purpose was to not get in trouble at home. And you got to see this principle that when the purpose is clear, the mundane becomes meaningful. So when the purpose is clear, the mundane becomes meaningful. Here's what I mean by that. If we're going to be inspired, we've got to have a goal or a vision or a purpose. And when we have that, we'll be willing to do things we wouldn't otherwise do. When I talk to folks in the work-based learning area, most of them, they may get frustrated talking to businesses, but for the most part, they're willing to do that. There are some students that drive them crazy, but they're fired up about that part. It's the paperwork, the process, the forms they have to fill out that typically frustrate them. And I'm not telling you that tomorrow you're going to wake up and love doing that, but you've got to remember when the purpose is clear, the mundane becomes meaningful. Can I speak very directly to you right now? There are people walking away from education at a higher rate than they ever have before. The reality is, with more than 50 people on this call, there are quite possibly some people, even in this world, that are going into summer and thinking, I wonder if this will be my last year I'm doing this. Maybe I got one more year in me, or how long. I want to encourage you to remind yourself of the purpose of what you do. And if you can have purpose, the mundane activities will become meaningful. You will never be consistently inspired without purpose. So that's number one. Now I want to talk about partners. It is not enough that we have a clear purpose. It's not enough that we have purpose. We've got to have partners who are in this world with us. when I think about this concept of partners, there are a lot of people that come to mind. You need partners as other teachers, other people in this world. You need partners if you're in the central office. You need partners. You need business partners in the community. You need a community like this of other people that can encourage you and support you in what you're doing. And the best kind of partners are not just people, they really serve two roles in our lives. Number one, they serve the role of encouraging us. Some of you know that we do work with Chick-fil-A. The late founder of Chick-fil-A was a guy named Truett Cathy, and he used to ask this question. I love this. He would say, how do you know if someone needs encouragement? And here was his answer: if they're breathing. If they're breathing. How do you know if someone needs encouragement? If they're breathing. Every single one of us need the kind of partners who will encourage us, who will affirm us, who will give us what we need to keep going. But that's not the only kind of partner we need. We also need people who will challenge us in certain ways. It's not enough for somebody just to tell us what we want to hear. We actually need people around us that tell us what we need to hear. I love this principle that great teams and great partners do these three things. They believe the best in each other, they want the best for each other, and they expect the best from each other. I don't normally share this. I shared it with a group in Milwaukee, and I'm feeling vulnerable, so I'll share it with you again. I started a business called ACTE in Atlanta, and we create leadership content and programs specifically for businesses, but sometimes for students. And our company had become the #1 company in Atlanta on the best place to work list a couple years in a row. So I felt like we had a really strong team. And I felt like we did really well at believing the best in and wanting the best for. We trusted people's motives. We wanted what was best for them. But we did something called a 360 assessment one time. If you've never done those, they're probably good for you, but they're not that fun. It's where everybody around you rates you and gives you feedback. And what I learned through that process is that the highest performers on my team were the most frustrated with me because they knew that I believed the best in, and they knew that I wanted the best for, but they did not believe that I expected the best from. Specifically, they didn't think that I was willing to hold our low-performing people accountable. See, I thought I was doing these people a favor because I was being nice to them, but the high performers were saying, Kevin, when you don't hold low performers accountable, you're making our job more difficult. And so here's what I found: that a great team, by the way, you could actually mark out team and write great teachers, believe the best in students, want the best for students, and expect the best from students. You could mark out the word teams or teachers, and you could put great bosses. Great bosses. All of us want a boss who believes the best in us, who wants the best for us, but also expects the best from us. And so one of the things that I learned, if we will not be consistently inspired, if we feel like we're on an island, having a clear purpose is not enough. We've got to have partners with us. And so I'd encourage you to be thinking about, who are those partners? Who are those people who are in this with you? You got to have purpose and you got to have partners, but you also have to have problems. Now, this is where some people are like, Kevin, do you know my world? Let me tell you how many problems I have. Like right now, I got a long list of problems that I'm dealing with. I've got plenty of problems. But what I want to challenge you with this thought, that if you have a clear purpose and you have partners in this with you, that you will only be inspired when you are adequately and appropriately challenging yourself with problems to overcome. And these aren't just random problems. These are things that are a good, healthy challenge that stands in the way of what you believe you are put here to accomplish. So as we are creating programs, as we create content for different groups, we always want to get better. And so a couple of years ago, we had somebody come and speak to our team. And when they spoke, they put this giant whiteboard up in front of us, and they wrote 4 words on the board. And by the way, if you're following along right now and you got a pen and a paper with you, I would highly encourage you right now, the pen and paper you're there with, write these 4 words down, because I'm about to give you a principle that might just change the trajectory of your life if you can grasp it. The 4 words they wrote were the word simple, and they drew a line, and the guy wrote the word complicated. On one side of the whiteboard, simple and complicated. And then he came over to the other side of the whiteboard and he wrote the word easy, and he drew a line and he wrote the word hard. Simple, complicated, easy, hard. Simple, complicated, easy, hard. Then he began to ask our team some questions. He said, when you are designing leadership programs, whether it's for students or employees, when you are creating content, when you're trying to make people better and you are teaching them concepts, should you strive to make those concepts simple or complicated? Should they be simple or complicated? We all said they should be simple. And he circled it. He said, yeah, you know, great teachers, great communicators, great leaders make concepts simple for us. And I love the way he described this. He said, simple is not about dumbing down, it's about prioritizing. Simple is not about dumbing down, it's about prioritizing. And so we've got to make things simple. That's the first step. This is George. Sorry, this is George, the one I told you the story about earlier. George, you can say hey real quick, and then you go back. Say hey. All right, now go back upstairs, okay? So simple and complicated, we should make things simple. And then he came over to this other side and he said, when we are teaching things, when we are creating concepts, when we're teaching kids, teaching students, should we make things easy or hard? Now, our team all said easy. We should make them easy. And he said wrong. And he circled the word hard. He said, we should make them hard. And I remember thinking, I don't want to make things hard. That seems unnecessary to us. But I'll never forget what he said. He asked us this question. He asked our team to consider, what are the things that we've accomplished in life that we're most proud of? In fact, I'm going to ask you to do this right now in the chat box. I would love for a few of you to be willing to share, what is something in your life that you have done that you are most proud of? It can be personally or it can be professionally. In your career, in your personal life, what have you accomplished that you're most proud of? I'll give you a few seconds. Here we go. What have you accomplished? Oh, wow. Some of these are really great. Being a decent person. There you go. Leslie, that's a good one. Anne-Marie, earning my doctoral degree. If I were to ask you a question, Anne-Marie, easy or hard? I know doctoral degree, that is really hard.
Pretty
Laura
hard.
Smith.
Pretty hard, and had a 2-year-old and was pregnant when I wrote it, with the final.
So all of these are hard. 2-year-olds, pregnant, and doctoral degree. You add them all together, it's really hard. But what you're most proud of? Teaching in the classroom where I was once a student, being a mother and earning my graduate degree. Again, hard. Earning my MBA as a 40-year-old mom of 8. Mom of 8. Jan, you're a hero. Adrian, successfully carrying out the requirements of my parents' trust. It's really hard. From single teenage mother to state level consultant. That is awesome. That is really hard. Achieving national board certification, moving up in my career. I did so many of these great. Defending a doctoral proposal, identifying a career that's fulfilling and helpful, raising 3 children that are now productive adults, working through imposter syndrome. I love that. While getting a master's in biology while still an art teacher, creating a work-based learning program before work-based learning was even a thing. You guys, I love these. There's so many incredible things that are always hard. Now, I want you to ask you to think about something. Everybody right now, think about this. If the things that we accomplish in life that we're most proud of are always hard, Why do most of us spend most of our days trying to make our lives as easy as possible? And the truth is that I'm guilty of this too. We know that the things that are fulfilling are hard, yet most of us, we wake up every day trying to make our lives easier. And so if you are going to be inspired, it's going to be things that are simple and hard. Simple and hard. When I meet people that run a marathon, you want to learn how to do that? It's actually a pretty simple process. It's not complicated, but it's really hard. I'm at the beach. Everybody just, when I get to the beach, every year I get here, I'm like, I wish I'd have lost a little bit of weight before I get to the beach. I saw, you know how to lose weight? It's really simple. It's just kind of hard. I saw this post the other day on Instagram that said, I want to lose weight, but I don't want to get caught up in any of those eat healthy and exercise scams. Anybody in that boat? Like it's simple, but it's hard. Here's what I'm going to tell you, that when we are trying to be inspired, we need to lean into the hard things. Not only do we need to lean into hard things, we ought to do this for people that we lead, other teachers, other educators. We need to do this for our students. We need to tell them, hey, this is a simple process, but it is going to be hard. When we lie to people and tell them it's going to be easy, that's when they get frustrated with us. I love this principle here that the greatest leaders, inspired leaders, simplify systems to amplify effort. If we want to be the kind of leaders that we need to be, we want to make the system as simple as possible, but we need to acknowledge that it's going to take effort to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And so go back to those moments you think about you were inspired, and I want to ask you to think about them again. And every time you're inspired, I can promise you, you've got a purpose or a goal or a vision. Those are different, but they function in the same way. You've got partners. That partner may be a coworker, it may be a colleague, it may be a friend, it may be a spouse. And you've got problems, you have challenges that are worth overcoming. I want to walk through one more framework, and then I'm going to pause, and we're going to talk about some things that are going on in your work that are inspiring that you can share with others. And then I'm going to tell you a story before we close today. But I want to ask you right now to perform an inspiration audit. If you are nearing the end of the school year and you're feeling uninspired, my hope is in a few minutes, these stories are going to inspire you. But I want you to think about what's missing. Maybe you're aimless. Maybe you're lacking in purpose. I think about those of you that have doctoral degrees. Do you know that I find that sometimes the most ambitious people unfortunately get to a point where they have achieved, and then they get there and they don't have the next goal outside of goal set, and so they feel aimless. For so many years, it was getting this degree, and then it was a master's degree, and then it was this, or it was creating the program and then building the program. But maybe you need to remember or think about once again, what's your purpose? If you're feeling aimless, maybe you're feeling apathetic. You got a bunch of problems. You got complicated problems, but you don't have the next challenge that's in front of you. Maybe you need to think about what that is, and it may be at work or it may be personally. And maybe you're lacking the partners. Maybe this community from ACTE is so valuable to you because you feel like you're on an island in the world you're in. This one is actually the most difficult if you're struggling with to solve. When I'm speaking before a live audience in person, I'll often be asked the question, Kevin, what do we do if we don't have partners in our life? And I go back to this old quote by a guy named Zig Ziglar, who said, he talks about friendship, but I believe it applies to partnership. He says, if you go out looking for a friend, you'll find they're very scarce. But if you go out to be a friend, you'll find them everywhere. And so how do you become that partner for other people? So you got to have all three: purpose, problem, and partners. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And I'm going to turn it over. I think Trisha is going to facilitate here for a minute. And I'd love for you guys to share some in the chat of what is inspiring you. What are some success stories this year that have inspired you to really make a difference? We'll pause for just a second as we get some of those.
Yeah, feel free to put them in the chat, or even if you're even feeling a little ambitious, go ahead and hit the unmute button and come on forward.
And while we're waiting on this, I would ask you, Leslie, if you would just jump on and share with that, tell us about the promotion. Oh, I think she walked away right then. There she is. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I had to close my door. There's a couple admins out there.
That's all right. Go for it.
Thank you. You know, I have been here at Saddleback College for about 10 years, and I love helping students. I just love it. I didn't know, I'm from pharmaceutical, so I didn't know that I would really enjoy it as much as I do. But I worked really hard and I did everything I possibly even outside of my job class. And, you don't really think that people notice, but people noticed. And so that it was kind of unexpected. But I really, when, you see that, the vice president's here, the president of the college notices things or they hear things and then they do it. I didn't apply for a promotion. They did it. I was the only one in the reorg for the college to get that promotion. So I just I really felt inspired by it and going above and beyond and just seeking that excellence with my encounters with students, and that it's seen. And so anyways, it inspired me, and it makes me just want to do even better for our students and do more. And yeah.
That's awesome. It seems like you really do have good partners that help in that.
I do. I work with an awesome team here in the Workforce Advancement Office, and everybody works so hard. So not only did I get a promotion, but I'm working for someone else here at the college that really believes in professional development, and he sees that passion in me. And so anyways, it's just inspiring. I really just appreciate it. It makes me want to do even more.
I love that. I'm going to skip around. If some of you would share, if others of you want to share, go for that. But I'd love to hear a couple in particular. Naomi, you talk about connecting middle school to the work-based learning conversation. Naomi, if you're available, I'd love for you to share about that.
Hi. Yeah. So it's great to see you again. Saw you at the Work-Based Learning Conference. I am one of the new Career Connected Learning Navigators, and I'm out in Oregon. And so Portland Community College is where my location and station is. But having the conversation about what does it mean to have work-based learning, that's already happening in the middle school, happening in the high schools in some of the programs that I'm connected with, but also seeing where that conversation hits with middle school, because middle school, we all know this as educators, is kids start leaning one way or another, liking things, not liking things. And so if we can have those conversations a little bit earlier about how we can connect the what they're doing in the classroom to then know how to better forecast for what's going to happen for them in the what they're doing in the classroom in middle school, and then forecast for that for high school so that they feel inspired to complete high school, right? And so there's a lot of dropout early on in those freshman and sophomore years. So if work-based learning can be, the conversation can start and or maybe start in middle school, what would that look like? So I feel like there's the beginning conversations of that, and I learned a lot about what's already happening in some programs like AVID when we were at the work-based learning conference, and already starting those same conversations now with our own Silicon Valley that we have here in Hillsborough to see if we can duplicate stuff that's already happening across other states. So
I love that. Anybody else want to share? I know Saf is at the beach, so she can, but I love this, finding 15 work-based learning educational pathway students who've gone into teaching, 10 within the district she's in. That is incredible. Anybody else want to share want to talk and share? Love just seeing those DECA students qualifying for international competition, traveling with them to California. Rob, that's awesome. Brandy, working with a cohort of CTE teachers across a full year to develop and implement work-based learning, hearing how it re-inspired them as teachers and made such a difference to their students. I love that idea of being re-inspired. And can I just want to just share this. The reason that I wrote this book, Inspired Every Day, is because I found that for too many of us, there are seasons that we go through where we don't feel inspired. And I would have loved, I actually wanted the book to be like, here's the 7 things or the 8 things you need to be inspired. And to be honest, there's a lot more than just these 3. But what I found is that you cannot consistently be inspired without those 3. And so if you're finding yourself uninspired, can I just tell you this, and this may not be that comfortable, but it's not up to your boss to fix it or somebody else. It's really up to you. And I'd encourage you to think about over this summer, what can you do? Maybe you need to download a book and listen to it. Maybe you need to go back and remember why you got into this in the first place. I want to share a story. Can I share this now, Trisha? Is that good? Can I just share the story before we close?
Oh,
Trisha,
yes, most
you
definitely.
tell me you're in Iowa?
Wisconsin.
Who was in Iowa earlier? Was Steven in Iowa?
Dana.
Dana's in Iowa. All right, Dana, this triggered this for me. And so I want to tell a story, just thinking about Iowa for a second. And this is a true story for everybody here. But when I think about students and young people that do incredible things, I don't know if any of you have heard of Norman Borlaug. If you live in Iowa, there's like a lot of conversations about Norman Borlaug. If you go everywhere else in the country, it tends to be that nobody else has ever heard of him. But Norman Borlaug, Dana, you know who Norman Borlaug is? Okay. Is the guy that figured out how to hybridize, modify, you can use whatever word you want, how to create corn and wheat in a way that they would grow in arid climates. Now, some of you that aren't science teachers are like, Kevin, it's the end of the school year, please, like arid climates, do we really have to talk about this right now? But hold with me, even if you've tuned out for the rest, hold with me for about 4 minutes here. This guy that you've never heard of, most of us have never heard of, like what he did is actually pretty impressive. They wrote a book about him. You can Google it. It's called The Man Who Fed the World. Norman Borlaug, The Man Who Fed the World. They gave him a Nobel Prize. And this guy that most of us haven't heard of, they actually credit with saving the lives of 2 billion people. 2 billion with a B. So that's why they call him the man who fed the world. Like, he's pretty impressive. So I felt like I needed to start the PR campaign for Norman Borlaug. Like, for everybody outside of Iowa, you need to know who this guy is. He needs some credit, check him out. But then you start to study the history, and there are some fascinating things. So if you go back, you're like, okay, Norman Borlaug's kind of impressive, but maybe the credit should actually go to Henry Wallace. Okay, Henry Wallace, anybody? All right, there's a lot of Henry Wallaces, I get it, but the Henry Wallace I'm talking about was vice president under FDR. FDR had 3 vice presidents. Truman was his 3rd. Henry Wallace was his 2nd. And when Henry Wallace before he was vice president of the United States, he was Secretary of Agriculture. And in his role as Secretary of Agriculture, he had this obsession. He wanted to figure out how to hybridize corn and wheat so they'd grow in arid climates. And so he spent his time, his energy, his money, his effort. He lobbied Congress, and Henry Wallace ended up convincing Congress to set aside an appropriation to study this. And they gave him the money to set up a station in Mexico. And Henry Wallace hired a young guy by the name of Norman Borlaug to run that station. So if you actually think about it, maybe Henry Wallace should get some of the credit too. I mean, he hired him. We think about work-based learning, like the student is amazing, but you also need somebody who's going to hire them. So maybe Henry Wallace should get some of the Nobel Prize, say that he helped save the lives of 2 billion people, call him one of the people who fed the world. Or maybe the credit should go to George Washington Carver. Now, I got a lot of people in education. Surely you know what George Washington Carver is famous for? He's famous for peanuts, right? All the things peanut butter, all the other things you could do with peanuts. But here's what a lot of people don't know. We're going to go to Dana's hometown, or not her hometown, her home state for a second. When George Washington Carver was a graduate student at Iowa State University, he spent time at his college campus on the weekends. And while George Washington Carver was on his campus, there was a professor that would bring his little son to work with him. And while the professor was busy, George Washington Carver spent time mentoring the professor's son, just pouring into his life, investing in him. He took him outside. He'd play in the garden with him. He instilled in that young boy a love for agriculture and the power of plants to change the world. And the young boy that George Washington Carver spent time with, his name was Henry Wallace. He grew up to be Vice President of the United States. He hired Norman Borlaug. So if you actually think about it, in addition to all the peanut things, we should give George Washington Carver a Nobel Prize, say that he helped save the lives of 2 billion people, call him one of the people who fed the world. Or maybe, hang on, just got another one for you. Maybe the credit should go to Moses. Maybe not the Moses you're thinking about. This is a guy named Moses and his wife Susan, who lived in Diamond, Missouri. And the short version of the story is that Moses and Susan lived in a state that had slavery, but they didn't believe in it. And because of their beliefs, it made their home a target. One night, a group named Quantrell's Raiders came to Moses and Susan's farm. They burned down their home. They stole their livestock. And that night, they snatched a mom and a little baby up, and they rode off into the distance. Moses and his wife, Susan, were distraught. That was Susan's best friend. And she said, Moses, you got to find a way to get the mom and the baby back. And Moses made connection after connection after connection. He ends up finding out that, unfortunately, the mom had died, but the baby boy was still alive. And so Moses arranged a deal. He said, look, that baby's of no use to you. It's either going to slow you down or you're going to kill it. You left me one horse. If you'll please, please, please just give me that baby back, I'll give you my last horse. And the group agreed. And on a cold January night, Moses, the farmer from Diamond, Missouri, rode his horse, his last horse, 4 hours north into Kansas. Met a group of guys with bags over their face and holes cut out for their eyes. And that night, Moses traded his last horse for what they threw him in a burlap sack on the ground. He knelt down, he opened it up, he pulled out a cold, almost dead infant baby boy. And that night, as Moses walked out this little baby boy, he made a commitment that he and his wife would educate and raise that little boy. And to show their commitment, Moses and Susan adopted that baby. And that's how Moses and Susan Carver adopted little baby George Washington, who became George Washington Carver. And so if you actually think about it, maybe Moses and Susan should get some credit too. You think about it, they adopted George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver mentored Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace hired Norman Borlaug. So maybe Moses and Susan should get some credit, give them a Nobel Prize, say that they helped save the lives of 2 billion people, call them the people who fed the world. Look, I don't know where you are in your professional journey right now, but here's what I want to tell you today. That story is a reminder to me that the decisions we make and the actions we take have long-term consequences, some of which we may never know. And some of those are big and bold and glamorous, like adopting a baby, maybe not glamorous, but big and bold, like adopting a baby. But some of those are things like hiring somebody. Some of those are about mentoring. You think about George Washington Carver in university, wasn't in his job description, wasn't something he had to do, but he chose to invest in the life of another person. And it played a part in a story that changed the course of society. I think about SAF saying 15 students who, 15 students who then were going into education, work-based learning, educational pathway, and now they've gone into teaching, 10 within their district. Some of those students may invest in somebody's life and change their life. And so I just want to remind you of this, I know there's bureaucracy at times. I know there's frustration, but the work that you do matters and it makes a difference. And I believe there are people you may never know whose lives will be touched by some of the things you're doing right now. So my hope is that you end this year well, that you hopefully get a little bit of time to rest and recuperate this summer, and you come back next year more inspired than ever to make a difference. And the level of inspiration of the people you interact with is often contingent on your level of inspiration. So do whatever you can to stay inspired personally. There are other people whose lives and their inspiration is depending on it. So again, I want to say what I said at the beginning. I can't believe you're here on a call on a Thursday afternoon at the end of the school year. You all are literally heroes. And so I'm thankful for you and what you're doing. And thanks for letting me be a small part of your journey as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tricia to wrap us up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you again to everyone for joining. We really do hope that you all have a wonderful and fantastic end to the 23-24 school year. We're really excited and eagerly anticipate seeing you all next fall, where we will kick off and start again with our monthly webinar series to hopefully carry some of this enthusiasm and excitement into that new school year. Please stay tuned. We are currently working on identifying those topics for the 24-25 school year, and we'll share that calendar out to everyone as soon as we have it so that we can continue to have some great conversations and grow. So Kevin, thank you again. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the holiday weekend with friends and family for everyone across the board, and we will see you next school year.
Thank you.